Honey, the amount of debt that the U.S. holds is embarrassing. If the U.S. were a person, they'd be in jail for money laundering, tax evasion, counterfeiting, inflating markets, and poverty pimping, honey. It is an entire mess. And if the U.S. does not increase its spending, it could lead to a default on its bills, which would likely carry catastrophic consequences. The consequences of a default could be economically disastrous, sending shockwaves through the financial and global markets. As the battle over the debt ceiling intensifies, here is what you need to know to understand the national debt, where it came from, who owns it, and how it is financed. And boy, oh boy, do we have a surprise for you at the end. Stay tuned. What's up, good people? Welcome back to Urban FinTech at the G Spot Studio channels, where we try to make finance and technology sexy. I'm your girl, G. All right, so a little breakdown of what the debt ceiling is. It is a limit on the total amount of government borrowing first put into place by Congress during World War I. It was meant to give blanket authorization for the Treasury Department to borrow money up to a set amount. But we know that has not been the case. And as we all know, the debt ceiling has been lifted time and time again. Lifting a debt ceiling was once a fairly routine vote, but since 1960, Congress has raised the ceiling 78 times, 49 times under the Republican presidents and 29 times under the Democrats. In recent years, however, the debate has turned particularly rancorous amid the growing partisan divide in Congress. The debt ceiling was last raised in 2021, and this news is a little bit old, so we know that it was also raised in 2023, and it currently stands at $33 trillion and going up. And previous to that, in 2021, it was at $31.4 trillion. And so we ask ourselves, what is national debt? It's almost every year the government spends more than it collects in taxes. That's the deficit. To make up the difference, it borrows money, which accumulates over time, and that is the debt. Simple. And so, where does this debt actually come from? Well, deficit spending and the national debt go all the way back to the founding of the Republic. And as you know, the Republic was established to avoid and sort of move away from the monarchies that we've seen in previous times in history. So the kings and the queens and these sort of tyrannical governments that were running the world. Well, the republic is meant to be for the people, by the people, more of a democratic type of process. And so that is where the debt came from. And some of our biggest contributors to debt are what we call federal programs. So Social Security and Medicare, they are referred to as mandatory spending because they operate on autopilot and don't have to be approved each year. So this is designated funds for these particular federal programs. These mandatory spending account for 63% of our total budget. Other programs fall under discretionary spending, which makes up about 30%. Now, with discretionary spending, lawmakers can decide each year whether to continue funding certain programs and by how much. By far, the largest chunk of discretionary spending, nearly half of it, is for defense. The other major contributor is interest on the debt. So think your student loans, but in the trillions. So every few months we hear these stories. Oh, the government is reaching the debt ceiling. We're going to go into default. There's going to be all these issues. Government is going to stop paying employees, etc., etc. Now, if the U.S. does default and there's no money to spend, the government suddenly wouldn't have cash to run the basic operations like roads and schools. So right away, government workers might stop getting paid. Businesses that have contracts with the government might not get paid, and that could mean a lot of layoffs. Social Security checks could stop going out. It would shock financial markets, might even cause a panic. After all, banks have loaned the U.S. government billions and billions of dollars. They hold a lot of debt that suddenly no one is sure will be paid. People could start to worry whether the banks are on solid ground, and that is a huge deal. And so hypothetically, that is when the financial systems freeze up, which means there's no more borrowing, businesses stop investing, and the markets go absolutely haywire. So, some of the old wise tales around our debt and debt ceiling consist of many things that could happen, potentially happen, in the event that we do not raise the debt ceiling. So, if we don't increase spending, there are several political consequences that could result. And here are some of the possible outcomes, and these are all the things that we constantly hear. But again, I told you I have a surprise for you at the end. So, there could be limited investment in infrastructure. So, insufficient spending can result in a lack of investment in infrastructure projects such as roads, bridges, public transportation, and utilities. And the aging infrastructure may deteriorate further than what we've already got going on in the country. And this could lead to increased maintenance costs, reduced efficiency, and potential safety risks. Another factor for not raising the debt ceiling could lead to a decline in public services. So, again, insufficient spending can negatively impact public services such as education, healthcare, and social welfare programs. Schools may struggle to provide quality education. Healthcare systems may face challenges in meeting the needs of the population, and social safety nets may be strained, potentially affecting vulnerable individuals and their families. Another consequence could be economic stagnation. Limited spending can hinder economic growth and innovation. Investment in research and development, technology, and entrepreneurship may decrease, resulting in reduced productivity and competitiveness. So, without adequate spending to stimulate the economic activity, job retention and job creation and wage growth may stagnate, leading to slower economic expansion. So not raising the debt ceiling can also lead to a infrastructure backlog. So we talked about all those different needs, transportation, roads, bridges. That could lead to a backlog in which these repairs aren't being done, the maintenance isn't being taken care of, and again, the delayed maintenance can lead to more extensive damage and higher expenses in the long run. So again, defaulting on our loans, not continuing to raise the debt ceiling could cause issues around reduced preparedness and resilience. So, again, this preparedness could hinder our emergency response systems. It could climate change mitigation measures can be affected as well, leaving the nation vulnerable to natural disasters such as hurricanes, floods, wildfires. And we're seeing that happen right now, even though we're increasing spending. So just imagine if we didn't have the financial means to address these emergency situations as they arise. So again, without adequate investment, the ability to respond effectively to emergencies and adapt to changing environmental conditions may be compromised. It can also cause an impact on research and development. Insufficient spending in these areas can hinder scientific advancements, innovation, and technological progress. Reduce funding for R&D can limit breakthroughs in various fields, including healthcare, energy, the environmental sustainability efforts, potentially impeding long-term economic growth and competitiveness. Not spending can also exacerbate some of our existing social inequalities that we see, which, spending or not, those inequalities are there, baby. So I don't know how that's really going to do anything. But insufficient investment in social programs like education, workforce development, they can widen the gap between different socioeconomic groups, making it more challenging for marginalized communities to access opportunities and to improve their circumstances. And so, again, not having this available money to continue on with our everyday functions, day-to-day operations can really hinder and cause catastrophic consequences. So let's talk about debt. Because when I think about my student loans and the amount of interest that I have on my student loans, it affects everything that I do, right? So I need to be constantly paying this debt off. It's never ending because it's accruing interest constantly. It's something that goes on your credit report. It's something that can hinder you from getting a job. It's something that you have to constantly be aware of and pay down in order for you to just live a average life. And so with the American government, their debt is not the same as an average household debt. They just have a ledger that has their investments, a ledger that has their amount of debt, and then they just say, okay, we know what that dollar amount is figuratively, right, in the ether, $33 trillion in debt, which is unfathomable. But there is no system or government or entity that is really an enforcement behind them paying off this debt. So it's just a constant money flow going out, but there's no checks and balances. It's very, very different from the household. And so why the government has those standards and we have some other standards is yet to be decided, understood. I have no clue how this works, but I did find a video. This is from Andre Zik. He is an excellent YouTuber, and I like the way that this was broken down. So check it out.
Owing itself. And it's really not that important because it's all just accounting trickery.
The thing that we refer to as the national debt is really nothing more than an accounting record. It's keeping track of how many dollars the government has added to the broader economy, minus how many dollars it has subtracted away from us, mostly through taxation.
Is there a reason you should want debt to be zero, precisely zero? No, there's no reason for that.
Relatable. I think we all want our debt to be treated that way. Listen, Mr. Chase, I know rent is due, but is there a reason you want that number to read zero? No, it's all accounting trickery. Just hit backspace on your computer a couple times and make it go away.
So listen, I don't know about y'all, but this really ticked me off because the government has no obligation to its debt, whereas us people, average American citizens, we do, right? They put the hammer down on us. We go to IRS jail. We get, a letter in the mail from the IRS, and they really are like the men in black coming in and make sure that we're paying all this money. And it's just like, okay, the government is borrowing money and then saying that they're going to pay it later at this amount. And if we don't pay it, then we'll give you this amount of interest, this much on bonds to other countries that we owe. Just reckless spending. And there is no one that is checking that. Right? There is no checks and balances. There is no enforcement around that. There is no one holding them accountable. And I have an issue with that. So I don't think this is very sexy. They need to change this debt ceiling idea. I think with blockchain technology, it could be revolutionary in terms of getting the money that is right there in that moment, instantaneous. It's the only thing you have. There's no future expectation, financial obligation associated with it. It's what is current. It is what is there. And this is a huge deal. Very complicated kind of system. It is obviously antiquated. And so out with the old, in with the new. Again, America, do better. And my people, since we're talking about debt, we're talking about currency. And I want to remind you that the second best currency is time. Be careful how you spend it. And the number one currency is love. Be sure to spread it. See you next time.